Your life is defined not by your job title, but by the person you are becoming every single day. In the next few minutes, you'll discover powerful strategies to put yourself first, build lasting habits, and grow in ways your career alone can't measure. This audiobook will guide you through actionable steps to define your personal goals, protect your time, eliminate distractions, and invest consistently in your future self, so that you don't just climb the ladder, you evolve into someone unstoppable. By the end of this session, you'll know how to prioritize growth over busyness, design boundaries that safeguard your time, choose environments that elevate you, and track true transformation that outlasts promotions. If you're ready to take control of your life and unlock your highest potential, hit subscribe to Audiobook Tone for more life-changing content delivered in powerful, practical, and easy-to-apply scripts like this one. Number 1, define growth goals beyond employment. You wake before the office lights come on, coffee steaming between your hands, and something quieter than the alarm tugs at the back of the throat, an uneasy sense that life is passing while the inbox expands. That feeling is not failure. It is information. It points at a mismatch between the life being lived and the life that matters most to you. Defining growth goals beyond employment begins with paying attention to that tug and translating it into a clear plan that builds a life rather than merely funds one. Begin by separating identity from job title. A title is a role you perform. A life is an architecture you design. When identity is tied to what you do for money, every performance review, every small compromise at work, and every late night becomes a weather vane for your self-worth. Growth goals beyond the job are commitments to become someone who can thrive, whether a paycheck arrives, a promotion happens, or the role disappears. These goals are durable. They create options, inner strength, and a sense of meaning that survives corporate reorganizations and external noise. Practical first step: write a North Star sentence. In one clear line, name the person you want to become 5 years from now, not the job you want. Make it specific, image-based, and for example, a confident storyteller who wakes energized, teaches one class monthly, and maintains strength in the gym 3 times weekly. That sentence is not a promise of outcome. It is a put it where you will see it on your bathroom mirror, as the first line in your journal, as a pinned note on your desktop. The short act of writing a vivid future builds neural maps. The mind orients toward it. Break the North Star into 3 domains: capability, character, and margin. Capability means practical skills and competencies: writing, coding, public speaking, financial literacy, health. Character covers habits, emotional regulation, courage, and dependability. Margin refers to time, money, and energy reserves that create freedom to act. For each domain, choose one measurable goal and one ritual that will move you there. Measurable goals hold you accountable. Rituals make change inevitable. Example: capability goal: complete a 12-week public speaking course. Ritual: practice a 3-minute talk 3 mornings each week before work. Character goal: respond calmly under stress. Ritual: 2-minute breath checks at the start of meetings. Margin goal: build a 3-month emergency fund. Ritual: automatically transfer a portion of each paycheck to savings. Design goals for seasons, not just years. The power of a 90-day frame transforms vague ambitions into executable experiments. Choose one 90-day project that aligns with your North Star. It should be ambitious enough to stretch, but narrow enough to finish. Track progress weekly. At the end of the season, run a review. What moved? What blocked? What surprised you? Use these observations to calibrate the next 90-day cycle. This cycle creates momentum. Small finishes create confidence, and confidence compounds. Translate long-term aims into daily language. The most successful growth plans are simple to describe and hard to ignore. Convert goals into tiny, repeatable units. Growth minutes. If the aim is to learn a language, set a target of 12 growth minutes daily, 10 minutes of flashcards, and 2 minutes of speaking practice. If the aim is creative output, set 30 minutes of uninterrupted writing before checking email. The brain loves rituals because they remove decision friction. A small daily action, Repeated rewires identity. Protect the early hours. Stoic practice admired the morning for its clarity. Modern life fills it with noise. Reserve the first hour after waking for growth. Reading, practice, planning while the mind is freshest. This is not heroic time. It is strategic time. Schedule it into your calendar and treat it like an important meeting. Show up. If mornings are impossible, reserve the last hour of the day for reflection and deliberate learning. The point is to place growth into the day where it cannot be crowded out by reactive work. Create a simple metrics dashboard. Growth does not need complicated analytics, but it does require feedback. Track 3 numbers weekly that reflect progress: hours practiced, pages written, money saved, miles run, whatever aligns to your North Star. Update the dashboard every Sunday evening. The act of recording converts vague intentions into accountability. The dashboard is a mirror that reflects choices back at you. Build a portfolio of assets, not just a resume. Jobs produce paychecks. Assets generate compound value. Divide growth goals into assets you can own. Skills, a portfolio of projects, relationships, mentors, peers, collaborators, content, published pieces, recorded talks, and financial reserve, savings, investments. For each asset class, choose one concrete deliverable in the next 6 months. A published article, a completed course, 2 new mentor conversations, 1 passive income experiment. These deliverables are proof that growth produces something real, not just feelings. Use constraints to fuel creativity. A common trap is waiting for perfect conditions. A clearer method is to design intentional constraints, time-boxed experiments that force focus. For example, commit to producing a short podcast episode in 4 weeks, using only a smartphone and a single microphone. Constraints reduce options and increase execution. Stoicism teaches that freedom emerges through discipline. Structure liberates attention for meaningful work. Accountability matters. Share the North Star sentence in 90-day project with a trusted person, peer, coach, friend, and schedule a quarterly check-in with them. Public commitments increase follow-through because social reality shapes behavior. If sharing with another person feels risky, create a digital trace. Publish a short plan on a personal blog, or use a private Google Doc with time-stamped updates. The principle is the same. Progress becomes a public fact rather than something hidden. Design exit criteria for obligations that drain your growth. Not every job task deserves the same attention. Create a simple rubric to evaluate work assignments and requests. Will this develop a skill, protect future options, or align to the core values? If not, treat it as a candidate for elimination, delegation, or delay. This practice is essential for reclaiming mental bandwidth. Saying no is not refusal of service. It is a statement of stewardship, protecting the energy for goals that matter. Practice the Stoic distinction between control and influence. External events will always shape career, whether reorganizations, market shifts, leadership changes. Growth goals provide stability because they live inside the domain of control, learning, discipline, relationships. When setbacks arrive, apply a simple triage. 1. Accept what cannot be changed without wasting energy. 2. Identify what can be influenced through action. 3. Choose the smallest effective step and execute. This approach turns moments of disorientation into clarity of purpose. Make room for joy. Stoic practice is often misread as grim austerity. Real Stoicism holds joy as a byproduct of virtuous action. Choose growth goals that feel alive, skills that bring curiosity, challenges that produce pleasure and mastery. Sensory engagement matters. The feel of a pen on paper after a writing session, the rise and fall of breath during a long run, the warmth of a call with a mentor. These sensory anchors create emotional associations that make discipline sustainable. Prepare for friction with an implementation plan for low-will moments. On days when motivation dips, predefine fallback options, a 10-minute version of the task, a sensory ritual that cues work, lighting a candle, playing a specific song, or a small reward after completion. Habit design treats motivation as unreliable. Structure becomes the reliable path forward. End each week with a short ritual. Review 3 wins, 1 lesson, and one decision for next week. This practice sharpens attention and closes the loop on learning. The wins are evidence of competence. The lesson is a source of humility. The decision forces clarity. Over time, weekly reviews become a compound engine for improvement. Begin now by writing one clear present tense sentence that names a growth goal beyond the job. Make it visual and sensory. What will be different in your morning, in your energy, in the conversations you have? Then choose one small ritual that will advance that goal today. Block the time. Execute. Record the result. Repeat. The aim is not to escape work, but to outgrow dependence on it for identity and meaning. When growth goals are clear and practiced daily, work becomes one valuable avenue among many, not the entire house of life. The life that results is steadier, richer, and more resilient. Mornings with purpose, evenings with progress, a mind that measures self by virtue rather than applause. That architecture begins with a single sentence, a small ritual, and the discipline to show up again tomorrow. Over months, these acts fold into character. Over years, they create a life designed to be owned, not endured. Number 2, audit habits, blocking inner evolution. The life we live is composed almost entirely of habits. The seemingly small choices we make hour by hour, what we read, how we react, where we spend energy, compound into either stagnation or transformation. Personal growth does not happen in a vacuum. It emerges through the deliberate shaping of daily actions. Auditing habits that block inner evolution is the act of holding a mirror to your life, not to criticize, but to illuminate the pathways that either advance or imprison you. It is a practice of clarity, courage, and compassion for yourself, because only by seeing what truly occupies your mind and body can you begin to redirect it toward becoming the person you are meant to be. Start by observing your energy, focus, and emotional state throughout the day. Make no judgment initially, simply notice. Track 3 distinct moments, one in the morning, one midday, and one in the evening. Record what you were doing, how you felt, and how much of your attention was captured fully by the activity. Patterns emerge quickly. The scrolling on social media that erodes creativity, the conversations that leave resentment behind, the endless checking of messages that fragments thought. Habits are often invisible because they are automatic. Observation is the first step in making the invisible visible. Next, identify the friction points where energy leaks. Every habit carries a cost, often unnoticed. Drinking coffee while doom scrolling, responding to non-essential emails immediately, multitasking between deep work and trivial obligations. These small costs accumulate. Ask yourself, what does this habit take from me? Time, focus, emotional stability, or confidence? Habits that block growth are not necessarily bad in a moral sense, but they are costly because they occupy space that could otherwise be dedicated to learning, creation, or reflection. By calculating the hidden costs, you assign value to change, and value is the spark that motivates action. Audit routines in 3 dimensions: mental, emotional, and physical. Mentally, observe the thoughts you entertain regularly. Are you ruminating, imagining worst-case scenarios, or replaying unnecessary grievances? Emotional habits involve the patterns by which you respond to stress or discomfort, irritation, avoidance, passive aggression, or self-sabotage. Physical habits are not limited to exercise or diet. They include posture, sleep hygiene, and how you organize your environment. Growth is holistic. A deficit in any one dimension undermines the others. A complete audit considers all 3 and maps their interplay. After mapping habits, categorize them as either fuel or drain. Fuel habits enhance creativity, focus, energy, or emotional resilience. Drain habits deplete these resources without producing meaningful output. Visualize these habits as a garden. Fuel habits are the plants that thrive. Drain habits are the weeds. Both exist naturally. The task is to prune the weeds ruthlessly while nurturing the plants with consistency. Doing so requires honesty and self-discipline, but also gentleness. Change is a practice, not an instant achievement. The next step is to quantify your habits. Create a simple log over 7 days. Track frequency, duration, and the impact on your mood, energy, and productivity. This is not for punishment, but for precision. Often we overestimate the time spent on growth activities and underestimate the hours frittered away. Concrete data transforms vague discomfort into actionable insight. Numbers provide clarity that subjective frustration can. Once the habits are cataloged and quantified, you can target interventions with precision rather than guesswork. Replace elimination with substitution. Simply removing a habit leaves a vacuum that often gets filled with something equally unproductive. Identify alternative actions that serve growth in the same context. If you habitually check social media first thing in the morning, replace it with 5 minutes of journaling or reading a passage that inspires reflection. If you interrupt deep work to answer trivial emails, schedule 2 specific 30-minute windows for that purpose instead. Substitution prevents relapse by maintaining a structure while redirecting energy to evolution, not escape. Design environmental triggers to support transformation. Habits are deeply tied to context. Small changes in surroundings can radically influence behavior. Remove cues that invite distraction and create cues that reinforce growth. Place books in sight of your workspace, mute notifications on devices, or designate a specific corner for reflection or learning. Environment is a silent partner in habit formation. It nudges action without requiring willpower. Strategically shaping it amplifies growth exponentially. Develop the skill of mindful resistance. Habits block evolution not only through action, but also through omission. The moments when inertia keeps you from doing what matters. Learn to recognize the pause before action, the tiny gap between stimulus and response. Within this gap lies freedom, the choice to act with intention. Strengthen this ability with micro-decisions. Choose to breathe deeply before reacting, to write one line before opening a device, to walk instead of scrolling. Each conscious choice trains the mind to favor growth over default comfort. Track progress continuously. Keep a simple record of changes, which habits have been eliminated, which substitutions have stuck, and what effects you notice in clarity, energy, and emotional stability. Reflection is the engine that converts effort into insight. Review every week and adjust ruthlessly. If a new habit is not producing the desired result, tweak the method, adjust the time, or replace it. Growth is iterative, not linear. Patience with consistent effort is essential. Anchor new habits with identity statements. The most resilient habits are tied to who you believe yourself to be. Instead of saying, "I am trying to exercise," say, "I am someone who values strength and energy." Instead of "I want to read more," say, "I am a person who invests in knowledge daily." Identity-driven habits are self-reinforcing. They survive friction, fatigue, and distraction because they align with the story you tell yourself about your life. Transformation happens when habits are not imposed but chosen as an expression of identity. Integrate reflection rituals. Daily reflection provides feedback loops that illuminate hidden habits. Ask questions each night. What drained me today? What energized me? What small choice had the largest effect? How did I act in alignment with growth? Record the answers. Reflection is the conscious lens through which subconscious actions become visible. Without reflection, habits remain invisible forces guiding life rather than tools for evolution. Embrace discomfort strategically. Many habits that block growth persist because they are easy or painless in the short term. Growth requires discomfort, delayed gratification, challenging conversations, creative risks. Audit the ease of current routines against the difficulty of desired outcomes. When a habit feels effortless but leaves stagnation, recognize it as a signal to challenge yourself. Purposeful discomfort is a compass pointing to evolution. Recognize the social dimension of habits. The people you interact with shape behavioral norms. If peers encourage distractions, complaints, or avoidance, these habits can infiltrate your own life. Audit social influences and align them with the inner evolution you desire. Seek conversations that expand perspective, challenge complacency, and provide accountability. Growth cannot thrive in isolation, but flourishes when supported by intentional community. Finally, integrate a system of rewards that reinforce progress without undermining discipline. Small acknowledgments, pausing to savor an accomplishment, marking a habit streak, or reflecting on improvement, strengthen neural pathways. Rewards do not require indulgence. They require recognition. Celebrating small victories sustains momentum, especially during long arcs of change when immediate gratification is scarce. Auditing habits that block inner evolution is not a one-time event but a lifestyle. It is the act of taking daily inventory, understanding the energy flows within life, and ruthlessly prioritizing what accelerates growth while eliminating what stagnates it. Over time, the cumulative effect of conscious, deliberate habit shaping is profound. Clarity replaces overwhelm, competence replaces chaos, and resilience becomes a constant companion. By committing to this process, every day becomes an opportunity to evolve, to move closer to a self that is strong, capable, and fully alive. This work is quiet, internal, and invisible to the untrained eye, but it builds a life that cannot be shaken by external turbulence, a life defined by deliberate action rather than reaction. Growth emerges not from chance but from meticulous attention to the routines that constitute our existence, and mastery begins with the willingness to see what truly holds us back. Number 3. Schedule learning before work demands. The quiet hours before the world fully stirs hold an extraordinary potential. In that space, the mind is fresh, free from the noise and interruptions of the day, and the willpower that will erode under constant demands is still intact. Scheduling learning before work is not about adding another task. It is about reclaiming the earliest, clearest moments for self-mastery. When learning is prioritized before obligations, it transforms from an optional luxury into a non-negotiable practice that compounds over time, creating a foundation for lasting competence, confidence, and freedom. The first step is to recognize the invisible drain of reactive living. Most people start the day responding to emails, notifications, and urgent demands, believing that productivity begins with action. In reality, the mind quickly becomes fragmented under constant interruptions, and learning requiring focus, attention, and deliberate practice is one of the first casualties. By scheduling learning before work, the mind engages in a form of proactive investment. It is an act of sovereignty, claiming the day on your terms before outside pressures arrive. Creating a morning learning ritual starts with clarity about what matters most. Identify one skill, body of knowledge, or practice that will provide the highest return on your growth. This is not the scattered pursuit of novelty. It is a disciplined focus on what moves the needle in personal and professional development. Whether it is reading, language acquisition, coding, creative writing, or meditation, the activity should be meaningful and measurable. Clarity ensures the earliest energy is directed toward a purpose, rather than distraction. Commit to a fixed time and treat it as sacred. This is not optional, negotiable, or subject to mood. A 60-minute block, or even 30 minutes if mornings are tight, is sufficient when consistently applied. Set boundaries with yourself and others. The learning period is non-negotiable. Place devices out of reach unless they are necessary for the practice. Make the environment conducive to focus, quiet, organized, and free of clutter. Small adjustments, lighting, temperature, and a designated workspace reduce friction and make adherence easier. Structure the learning session deliberately. Break it into 3 elements: acquisition, reflection, and application. Acquisition involves absorbing new material, whether through reading, lectures, or guided instruction. Reflection is the act of internalizing what has been absorbed, asking questions, summarizing insights, and linking them to existing knowledge. Application transforms understanding into action, even in a small experimental form. This triad ensures learning is not passive but dynamic, cementing knowledge in a way that survives distraction and time. Accountability enhances commitment. Track sessions in a visible log or journal. Record not just attendance, but insights, progress, and questions. Knowing that each session will be reviewed or recorded provides a subtle external pressure that strengthens discipline. Over time, the journal becomes a tangible map of growth, showing the accumulation of knowledge and the consistency of effort. It is impossible to underestimate the psychological reinforcement that comes from seeing incremental progress over weeks and months. The early morning ritual also demands alignment with circadian rhythms. Identify the time when focus peaks naturally and schedule learning then. For some, this may be immediately upon waking. For others, it might follow light physical activity that activates energy. Experimentation is necessary because effectiveness is not solely determined by duration, but by attention and clarity. Protecting this alignment ensures that the time devoted to learning yields maximal cognitive return. Eliminate decision fatigue in advance. Plan what will be studied the night before, removing the morning question of what should I do. The mind in early hours operates best with pre-decided pathways. Set materials ready, books open, notes available, devices charged. Reducing friction at the start allows energy to flow directly into learning rather than getting trapped in preparation or indecision. The more streamlined the launch, the more likely the session becomes habitual and reliable. Integrate multisensory engagement to strengthen retention. Reading alone is often insufficient for deep learning. Combine listening, writing, visualization, or teaching the concept aloud. Create diagrams, mind maps, or bullet point summaries. Speak key ideas to reinforce memory pathways. Engage physically where possible. Movement stimulates neural networks and prevents cognitive stagnation. The brain learns most efficiently when it is challenged to process information in multiple modalities simultaneously. Guard this time rigorously from interruptions. Even a single email or notification can break focus and reduce the effectiveness of learning. Communicate boundaries to household members or colleagues if necessary. The morning hour is dedicated, untouchable, and intentional. External clarity reinforces internal discipline. When interruptions occur despite planning, use short pauses to recenter and refocus, rather than abandoning the session entirely. Resilience in the face of disruption reinforces the habit and builds mental toughness. Pair the learning ritual with a ritualistic cue. This could be a specific beverage, a brief walk, a stretch, or lighting a candle. The cue signals the brain to transition into a focused state. Over time, the mind associates the cue with the practice, reducing the need for conscious effort to start. Habits are strengthened when the brain expects certain actions following specific triggers. This leverages natural neurological tendencies to reinforce consistency. Measure progress, not just participation. Learning must be evaluated to ensure growth is occurring. Weekly reflection can include summarizing key lessons, attempting application exercises, or testing recall. Compare performance over time, noticing both skill development and understanding deepening. Tracking progress ensures the practice is not ritualistic in isolation, but purposeful, moving the needle on capability and knowledge. Consider learning as a form of resistance against distraction and default living. The world provides constant noise, competing for attention with content that is easy and often trivial. Morning learning is a declaration that your mind is not a passive receptor but an active engine for mastery. Each session builds not only knowledge, but also mental resilience, focus, and self-respect. The cumulative effect transforms the way challenges are approached throughout the day. Embed integration into the day's workflow. Insights from early learning should be applied, referenced, or considered in professional and personal decisions during work hours. Reflection alone strengthens understanding, but application converts theory into skill. Even minor adjustments, changing a workflow based on a morning reading, practicing a technique at work, or using a new communication approach, reinforce learning and cement it into habit. Balance intensity with sustainability. It is easy to overcommit in the first days and falter quickly. Growth is a marathon, not a sprint. Start with manageable blocks that feel rigorous, but achievable. Consistency is more valuable than duration in early habit formation. Once the habit is established, intensity can increase naturally. The key is to embed the practice into identity, so it persists regardless of external conditions or workload. Recognize the psychological transformation beyond skills. Morning learning cultivates a sense of autonomy and agency. The day begins with choice rather than obligation. This primes confidence, reduces stress, and allows work to be approached from a position of strength rather than reactive survival. Control over the first hours cascades into clarity and effectiveness throughout every decision that follows. Finally, Treat the practice as a non-negotiable covenant with yourself. The value of learning before demands of work is not an immediate reward, but in the long-term architecture of life. Knowledge, skills, insight, and mental resilience compound quietly, creating leverage that no external circumstance can erase. Each session reinforces identity, someone who grows, who invests in themselves, who prioritizes mastery over mere busyness. Over months and years, these small, early morning sessions accumulate into extraordinary transformation, turning ordinary days into a continuous ascent toward potential realization. By committing to learning before work demands, the day begins with clarity, focus, and purpose. This practice ensures that growth is not accidental or reactive, but deliberate and unstoppable. The rhythm established becomes self-reinforcing, producing confidence, skill, and resilience that permeate every interaction, decision, and challenge. Time invested in the first hours becomes a foundation upon which the rest of life is built, a fortress of knowledge and self-mastery that no external obligation can dismantle. Number 4. Build identities separate from career. A person's work often becomes a mirror for their identity, reflecting not who they are but what they do. When a title, role, or paycheck defines self-worth, every setback, criticism, or missed promotion resonates far beyond the office, eroding confidence and peace. Building an identity separate from career is the deliberate act of creating an internal compass that measures value, purpose, and growth independently of external validation. It is about rooting identity in principles, capabilities, and character, rather than in schedules, deadlines, or hierarchical structures. Doing so provides freedom, resilience, and a foundation for sustained personal evolution, no matter what the professional landscape presents. The first step is to inventory the facets of self that have been entwined with work. List all the ways career defines you: skills you boast, titles you flaunt, accomplishments you equate with worth. Identify emotional patterns tied to performance: pride when praised, anxiety when tasks feel uncertain, sadness when recognition is absent. Awareness of these connections creates clarity. They are not weaknesses, but signals indicating where internal identity has been outsourced to external structures. Recognition is the first act of reclaiming self-sovereignty. Next, articulate the attributes, passions, and values that exist outside professional demands. This could include intellectual curiosity, creativity, empathy, disciplines, spiritual practices, physical fitness, or hobbies that cultivate skill and joy. These dimensions form the core of an independent identity. Write them down, describe them in detail, and consider how they manifest daily. Give them equal weight and attention as work achieved. When practiced intentionally, these areas strengthen self-worth from the inside, creating a buffer against the volatility of career-driven validation. Develop daily rituals that reinforce non-career identity. These could include journaling to explore thoughts, exercising to honor the body, engaging in creative work, volunteering, or deep reading. Rituals serve as anchors, repeating the message that value is intrinsic, not conferred. Over time, these actions embed identity in consistent behaviors rather than temporary outcomes, ensuring that confidence does not fluctuate with workplace turbulence. Reframe how success is defined. Success in life should not be limited to promotions, salary, or recognition. Define it in terms of character growth, skill development, and meaningful contribution. Measure accomplishments by resilience, courage, discipline, and capacity to navigate complexity, not by external applause. This redefinition shifts focus from ephemeral rewards to enduring capabilities, establishing a foundation for self-esteem that is independent of office politics or market conditions. Examine relationships and social interactions. The people we spend time with often reinforce career-centric identities. Friends or colleagues who equate worth with titles or income can subtly tether self-perception to external metrics. Choose relationships that value the person you are becoming, not just the roles you occupy. Engage with individuals who inspire curiosity, challenge your thinking, and encourage growth in multiple dimensions. These interactions reinforce a broader, multidimensional identity. Invest time in personal projects, unrelated to career, whether writing, creating art, learning an instrument, developing a small business, or volunteering. These endeavors produce tangible results that belong solely to you. They cultivate mastery, confidence, and pride that do not rely on job performance. Engaging in pursuits where outcomes are controlled by your skill and effort, rather than hierarchy, strengthens the sense that self-worth is self-determined. Establish financial and temporal independence to further decouple identity from career. Reliance on a single source of income creates pressure, making the mind and emotions overly reactive to job outcomes. Building financial literacy, savings, and optionality in lifestyle choices reinforces that value and security are not derived exclusively from a professional role. When the mind knows it can thrive without constant reliance on external confirmation, identity solidifies around self-sufficiency and discipline. Practice reflection with precision. Allocate time weekly to examine which actions, thoughts, and decisions were motivated by intrinsic values versus external validation. Ask questions. Was this choice aligned with my principles, or influenced by approval seeking? How much of my emotional response hinged on work recognition? Reflection builds awareness of the subtle ways identity can be compromised and allows course correction. Over time, habitual reflection rewires perception, making intrinsic value the default lens. Anchor identity in mastery and contribution. Identify areas where skill development, insight, or positive influence can be measured without involving professional hierarchy. Contribution to community, family, or personal growth projects creates a deep reservoir of self-respect. These anchors produce tangible evidence of capability, rendering career-driven metrics less central to self-assessment. Mastery and contribution act as stabilizers, ensuring that confidence and pride endure even when work outcomes fluctuate. Reinforce autonomy through boundaries. Clear delineation between professional obligations and personal time prevents the job from dominating mental and emotional space. Establish limits on when and how work intrudes into private life, and respect those boundaries with consistency. Autonomy nurtures identity by protecting space for self-directed growth, reflection, and engagement in activities aligned with intrinsic values. Over time, these boundaries reinforce a sense of ownership over life, rather than outsourcing it to external demands. Cultivate a narrative that centers on growth and resilience, rather than titles or income. Craft stories about your life, focused on learning, overcoming challenges, and evolving skills. When recounting achievements, highlight processes, perseverance, and insight rather than promotions or recognition. Internalizing a narrative that emphasizes agency over external validation strengthens self-perception, building a resilient identity that is not dependent on the fluctuating conditions of professional life. Engage in practices that reveal the distinction between self and role. Meditation, journaling, or solitude provides the mental space to observe thoughts, desires, and reactions independent of work. Through sustained attention to internal states, it becomes apparent that self-worth is not inherently tied to outcomes or recognition. This separation creates freedom, the ability to act intentionally, choose opportunities aligned with growth, and resist the pressures of societal definitions of success. Celebrate personal achievements that are unrelated to career metrics. Completing a physical challenge, mastering a skill, or contributing meaningfully to others' lives provides concrete evidence of growth beyond professional performance. Acknowledge these successes internally and externally. By doing so, the mind gradually internalizes a broader conception of self that values competence, effort, and ethical action, not just occupational outcomes. Integrate resilience practices that reinforce identity independent of external circumstances. Stoic exercises, such as reflecting on impermanence, imagining potential setbacks, or rehearsing adversity, cultivate emotional stability. When identity is tethered solely to a job, setbacks can cause disproportionate emotional upheaval. Practicing resilience strengthens the understanding that self-worth is grounded in principles, preparation, and discipline, making external shocks less destabilizing. Adopt a lifelong learning mindset that is decoupled from career advancement. Pursue knowledge for curiosity, skill development, and the joy of understanding, rather than promotion. Treat every learning experience as an investment in competence, independence, and wisdom. This mindset reinforces the separation between identity and occupation, ensuring that growth is internally motivated and not contingent upon recognition or external reward. Design the life you want beyond professional obligations. Map out routines, relationships, habits, and projects that bring fulfillment, challenge, and meaning, irrespective of career outcomes. Prioritize time spent on endeavors that nourish the person you wish to be, not only the employee. When life is structured around internal priorities, identity becomes anchored in purpose, capability, and values rather than external affirmation. Practice consistent self-assessment of alignment. Periodically evaluate whether your actions, emotional responses, and priorities are defined by internal principles or external expectations. Adjust behaviors and commitments to reinforce intrinsic identity. Over time, this practice of calibration ensures that the self remains autonomous, adaptive, and grounded, capable of evolving without being dictated by workplace dynamics. Ultimately, building an identity separate from career is the deliberate act of reclaiming agency over how self-worth, purpose, and growth are measured. It requires observation, reflection, consistent practice, and the courage to disentangle ego from external validation. By investing in personal rituals, cultivating skills, fostering relationships, and creating narratives independent of professional achievements, the mind becomes anchored in principles, resilience, and self-determined value. Over time, this deliberate separation produces profound freedom, a self that thrives under any circumstance, confident in its own capacities, and impervious to the transient fluctuations of career success. Life gains depth and stability when worth is generated internally rather than externally, and identity becomes a durable foundation upon which growth, joy, and purpose can flourish indefinitely. Number 5, replace busyness with intentional mastery. Most of life is consumed by movement that feels urgent but lacks significance. Tasks pile up, emails demand immediate attention, meetings fill the calendar, and yet, when the day ends, there is often little to show for the energy expended. This is busyness, activity without strategic impact. Replacing busyness with intentional mastery is the conscious choice to direct energy toward actions that create depth, skill, and long-term results. It is about discerning between motion and progress, between distraction disguised as productivity and work that genuinely elevates capability and influence. Intentional mastery requires clarity, focus, and ruthless prioritization, producing results that compound over time. Begin by auditing your day with precision. Record every activity over 3 consecutive days, including minor interruptions, small breaks, and habitual gestures that consume attention. Assign a value to each task based on its contribution to your growth, skill development, or meaningful outcomes. Many activities that feel necessary, checking messages repeatedly, attending low-value meetings, multitasking, are actually drains on attention. Seeing them on paper provides undeniable evidence of where busyness masquerades as productivity. Once the audit is complete, define the few high-impact domains that truly matter. Identify 2 to 4 areas where skill improvement, decision-making, or creative output produces outsized results. These domains become anchors for all intentional activity. Everything else becomes a candidate for delegation, delay, or elimination. Intentional mastery thrives when attention is concentrated, scattered focus dilutes learning, performance, and progress. Mastery grows in depth, not breadth, and requires protection against the noise of unnecessary demands. Adopt the practice of time blocking. Allocate large, uninterrupted periods to high-value tasks that align with your growth and mastery goals. Avoid micromanaging each minute excessively, but ensure that deep work periods are sacrosanct. During these windows, eliminate distractions, silence notifications, close irrelevant tabs, and signal to others that focus is in session. Deep, undisturbed engagement is the vehicle through which skill transforms from knowledge into capability. Prioritize quality over quantity. Busyness often equates effort with hours spent, rather than results achieved. Intentional mastery reverses this equation, Performance and insight are more valuable than sheer volume of action. Focus on deliberate practice, where repetition is coupled with reflection and incremental adjustment. This creates progress that is measurable, durable, and significantly more impactful than unfocused labor. Replace reactive habits with proactive planning. Each day begins with an assessment of the most meaningful action that can be taken and ends with reflection on whether that action was accomplished. This process reduces the tendency to chase minor fires and ensures that effort aligns with long-term objectives. Reactive living leads to exhaustion, scattered energy, and stagnation. Intentional living produces leverage and influence over the trajectory of skill development and results. Embrace the principle of subtraction. Removing non-essential tasks is more powerful than adding new ones. Identify commitments, obligations, or routines that provide little long-term value, drain energy, or fragment attention. Saying no becomes a tool of liberation rather than restriction. By reducing noise and eliminating trivial activities, space is created for concentrated mastery. Freedom emerges not from accumulation, but from disciplined subtraction. Integrate micro-improvements into habitual activities. Intentional mastery is reinforced by consistency in small, deliberate steps. Instead of performing actions automatically, infuse each repetition with conscious effort and reflection. Whether practicing a skill, engaging in creative work, or managing a professional responsibility, approach every moment with mindfulness and attention. Incremental refinement compounds, transforming ordinary activity into profound capability. Set precise outcomes for every session of work or learning. Vague intentions produce motion without growth. Determine what must be achieved, learned, or created within each period. Measure progress against clear criteria, allowing for objective assessment of skill development or accomplishment. This discipline transforms the day from a reactive series of tasks into a structured progression toward mastery. Integrate reflection rituals. Each evening or end-of-week session, review the outcomes achieved relative to the time and energy invested. Identify moments of distraction, unproductive motion, or wasted attention. Record insights and adjust plans accordingly. Reflection turns routine activity into a learning cycle, ensuring that busyness is gradually replaced with purposeful action. Anchor mastery and intrinsic motivation. Work performed solely for external recognition or approval tends to generate stress and fleeting satisfaction. True mastery is sustained when the individual values the skill itself, the process of improvement, and the cumulative impact on competence. Internalized motivation strengthens commitment, resilience, and engagement, even during periods of challenge or limited external reward. Guard against shallow multitasking. Divided attention produces superficial output and undermines growth. Intentional mastery requires singular focus, prioritizing depth over the illusion of efficiency. Complete one high-value task before beginning another, and resist the pull of constant context switching. Depth produces skills that last. Scattered effort produces exhaustion without advancement. Embed learning within practice. Each task, project, or responsibility should include a reflective component. What was done well, what can be improved, and what insight can be carried forward. This approach transforms ordinary work into a training ground for mastery, leveraging existing obligations for growth rather than treating them solely as endpoints. Balance effort and recovery strategically. Mastery requires energy, not just time. Schedule rest, reflection, and physical renewal deliberately to sustain peak performance over the long term. Recognize that constant activity, no matter how structured, cannot replace recovery in producing durable skill, insight, or creative capacity. Design feedback loops. Seek critique, evaluation, or data that provides insight into effectiveness and skill progression. Feedback transforms action into adaptive learning, preventing repetition of errors and accelerating growth. Without feedback, even intentional effort risks stagnation. Mastery requires correction, refinement, and alignment with objective standards. Use constraints to heighten focus. Artificial limits, such as time caps, resource restrictions, or self-imposed rules, can sharpen attention and force prioritization. Constraints encourage creativity, compel precision, and prevent the diffusion of effort across low-value activities. By imposing deliberate boundaries, mastery becomes intentional rather than accidental, structured rather than scattered. Celebrate progress and milestones intentionally. Recognition of achieved skill, insight, or accomplishment reinforces commitment to the path of mastery. Rewards should be aligned with growth, reinforcing internal motivation rather than external validation. This process sustains energy and focus, ensuring continued progression without dependence on constant external reinforcement. Anchor mastery and long-term vision. Each day, session, and task should connect to a broader trajectory of capability, influence, or knowledge. When activity is linked to a higher purpose, even challenging or tedious efforts become meaningful. Vision provides context and prioritization, transforming ordinary moments into deliberate building blocks of excellence. Eliminate digital noise. Social media, trivial notifications, and endless information streams fragment attention and simulate busyness. Intentional mastery thrives in focused, uninterrupted mental space. Remove, mute, or schedule access to digital inputs to preserve cognitive energy for tasks that genuinely expand skill and capability. Finally, adopt the mindset of continuous refinement. Busyness is seductive because it feels productive, but it is shallow. Intentional mastery is cultivated through repeated conscious assessment of effort, attention, and outcome. Each day offers an opportunity to replace motion with meaning, repetition with deliberate practice, and distraction with focus. Over time, this approach transforms ordinary routines into systems of capability, creating momentum, confidence, and skill that endure far beyond the fleeting urgency of daily busyness. By replacing busyness with intentional mastery, life shifts from reaction to creation, from shallow accumulation of activity to deliberate construction of ability. The hours that once dissolved into endless motion become foundations for competence, insight, and influence. This discipline produces not only tangible outcomes, but also a mental architecture that thrives under pressure, adapts to change, and continuously evolves. Mastery becomes both a practice and a state of being, turning ordinary days into deliberate, powerful steps toward personal excellence. Number 6. Invest weekly in future self. Every choice made today shapes the person you will become tomorrow. Yet too often, life is lived in reaction to the present, chasing urgent tasks while neglecting the silent work of building a future self. Investing weekly in your future self is the conscious commitment to actions that compound over time, creating knowledge, skill, resilience, and character that will pay dividends long after immediate pressures fade. This practice is not abstract or speculative. It is tangible, deliberate, and measurable, bridging the gap between fleeting comfort and long-term capability. The first step is to define what your future self looks like. Paint a vivid image in precise, concrete terms: the skills you have mastered, the habits you embody, the knowledge you possess, the relationships you nurture, and the emotional stability you maintain. This future self is a projection grounded in aspiration and discipline, not fantasy. The clearer the picture, the easier it becomes to chart weekly actions that serve it, turning intention into structured investment rather than wishful thinking. Next, allocate a fixed period each week for activities dedicated solely to the growth of that future self. This is sacred time, protected from reactive demands, interruptions, and trivial distractions. The duration can vary, 2 hours, 4 hours, or even a full day, but consistency is paramount. This regular investment creates momentum and embeds progress into the rhythm of life. The future self is nurtured not by occasional bursts of effort, but by disciplined, repeated action. Identify high-leverage activities that accelerate growth. Not every task contributes equally. Choose initiatives that develop competencies, expand insight, and cultivate habits with long-term impact. Reading thought-provoking material, engaging in deliberate practice, learning a new skill, or working on a personal project all generate compounded value. Activities should be tangible and actionable, with measurable outcomes that reveal progress over time. By focusing on high-leverage actions, weekly investment yields returns far greater than scattered effort. Document the progress systematically. Maintain a weekly log that captures what was accomplished, insights gained, challenges encountered, and lessons learned. Reflection transforms activity into understanding. Recording growth allows for iterative refinement, revealing which approaches produce meaningful progress and which habits need adjustment. Over months, this documentation becomes a living map of personal evolution, evidence that effort applied consistently produces transformation. Pair investment with conscious learning. Engage in study, research, or guided practice that builds knowledge and capability. Future self-investment is most effective when it combines theory and practice, understanding and application. For example, mastering a professional skill might involve reading industry literature, followed by applying concepts in a controlled project. Learning without application remains abstract. Application without reflection remains shallow. The combination ensures growth is both durable and practical. Include physical and mental resilience in weekly planning. Skills, knowledge, and insight are amplified when supported by health, energy, and focus. Incorporate activities that enhance stamina, mental clarity, and emotional balance. Exercise, meditation, sufficient sleep, and nutritional attention form the foundation on which all other investments compound. A future self incapable of sustaining effort or concentration cannot fully realize potential. Physical and mental cultivation is as essential as intellectual development. Set incremental goals that align with the long-term vision. Weekly action should feed into broader objectives, ensuring each step contributes to sustained progress. Break larger ambitions into manageable, measurable milestones, and focus on achieving them sequentially. Incremental progress strengthens confidence and reinforces the value of consistent effort. The future self is shaped not by sudden leaps but by repeated intentional strides toward mastery, insight, and capability. Practice conscious resource allocation. Time, energy, and focus are limited. Investing in the future self requires deliberate prioritization. Recognize which current habits, commitments, or activities detract from long-term objectives and either reduce, delegate, or eliminate them. Every decision to spend attention on short-term distraction is a missed opportunity to build capacity for tomorrow. Intentional allocation of resources protects growth and ensures that weekly investment is both consistent and effective. Integrate accountability mechanisms. Share goals and progress with a mentor, peer, or group committed to growth. Public commitment heightens responsibility, while feedback offers perspective and correction. Alternatively, maintain a private tracking system with defined review intervals. Accountability transforms abstract intention into enforceable action. It creates an external anchor that reinforces internal discipline, ensuring that weekly investments are not skipped or diluted by convenience. Engage in creative output. Building the future self is not only about consumption of knowledge, but also the generation of work that embodies learning, insight, or skill. Writing, designing, coding, teaching, or problem-solving produces tangible evidence of growth and fosters competence. Creative output solidifies internal understanding and extends capability beyond personal mastery into influence, contribution, and meaningful accomplishment. Reflect on alignment weekly. Evaluate whether the actions of the week were congruent with the vision of the future self. Identify divergences, gaps, or unproductive patterns. Consider emotional responses, moments of distraction, or areas of hesitation as indicators of habits requiring adjustment. Reflection is critical. It transforms mere activity into adaptive progress, allowing each subsequent week to build on knowledge of what works and what impedes growth. Include deliberate challenges. Growth occurs at the edge of comfort. Design weekly exercises that stretch abilities, provoke problem-solving, or push emotional resilience. These challenges create the conditions for skill refinement and character development. A future self that is resilient, capable, and confident emerges from repeated exposure to difficulty and thoughtful navigation of obstacles. Celebrate compounding results. Recognize that the cumulative effect of consistent weekly investment far exceeds the sum of individual efforts. Small actions accumulate into skill, insight, and capability that, over months and years, create a level of competence unattainable through reactive living. Tracking and acknowledging this compounding reinforces motivation and demonstrates that deliberate investment in self is the most reliable source of long-term return. Build a feedback loop between weekly investment and life integration. Apply insights, skills, and knowledge gained during the dedicated time to everyday decisions, professional challenges, and personal interactions. This reinforces learning and ensures the future self influences present behavior. By integrating growth into lived experience, the investment extends beyond isolated hours into the broader fabric of life, making the practice catalytic rather than compartmentalized. Design rituals that reinforce commitment. Rituals anchor behavior, reduce decision fatigue, and cultivate consistency. Whether it is a Sunday review session, a Friday planning reflection, or a nightly journaling habit, structured repetition ensures that investment in the future self becomes habitual rather than optional. Rituals create momentum and encode growth into daily rhythm, turning deliberate action into sustained practice. Anticipate obstacles and pre-plan responses. Life's unpredictability often disrupts consistent effort. Identify potential barriers, unexpected responsibilities, energy dips, or environmental distractions, and develop contingency strategies. Pre-planning ensures that commitment to the future self remains robust, maintaining consistency even under pressure. Mastery over circumstance begins with anticipation and preparation. Anchor progress in self-efficacy. Each week's effort should reinforce the belief that personal action produces meaningful change. Recognize capability, agency, and perseverance as outcomes of repeated, intentional practice. This self-reinforcement strengthens resilience and motivation, creating a virtuous cycle where consistent investment generates confidence, and confidence fuels continued effort. Balance ambition with sustainability. Overextending or attempting to accelerate growth too aggressively can produce burnout and undermine progress. Weekly investment should be ambitious enough to challenge, but calibrated to remain achievable and sustainable. Steady, deliberate effort builds the future self more reliably than sporadic intensity, producing results that endure under stress and fluctuation. Finally, embrace patience and long-term perspective. Weekly investment in the future self is a marathon, not a sprint. The impact of consistent effort compounds gradually, often invisible in the short term. Trust in the process, maintain discipline, and continue to refine action. Over months and years, deliberate weekly investment transforms knowledge into expertise, effort into habit, and intention into identity. The future self is forged in these repeated conscious actions, creating a life shaped by choice, capability, and vision rather than by circumstance or reactivity. By committing to weekly investment, each session becomes a building block for enduring growth. The future self is not a distant abstraction. It is a tangible product of repeated, deliberate effort. Every hour dedicated to learning, reflection, skill building, and resilience strengthens the architecture of competence, independence, and capability. Over time, the compound effect produces profound transformation. A person prepared to navigate complexity, embrace challenge, and thrive under conditions where others remain reactive and stagnant. Investing weekly in the future self is the most powerful strategy to convert intention into reality, effort into mastery, and present action into enduring legacy. Number 7. Design boundaries protecting growth time. Time is the most precious resource, yet it is constantly under siege. Messages arrive uninvited, obligations multiply silently, and demands disguised as emergencies erode moments meant for growth. Without deliberate boundaries, the day is surrendered to the urgent rather than invested in the important. Designing boundaries that protect growth time is the act of constructing invisible walls around the hours that matter most, safeguarding attention, energy, and focus for practices that build skills, insight, and resilience. This is not about avoidance, but about preserving the conditions in which meaningful transformation can occur. The process begins with identifying the periods in the day when growth is most effective. Energy and attention are finite. Some hours are naturally better suited for focused learning, creative output, or skill refinement. Pinpoint these windows by observing when the mind is sharpest, least reactive, and most capable of sustaining deep engagement. These hours become the foundation for protected growth, the segments of time where deliberate action compounds into long-term progress. Next, map the sources of intrusion that threaten these windows. Emails, notifications, calls, social obligations, or internal distractions all act as subtle thieves of attention. Catalog each interference with honesty and specificity, noting frequency, duration, and impact. Understanding where and how attention is compromised allows boundaries to be designed with surgical precision, targeting the interruptions that matter most without overcomplicating life. Once the threats are identified, create concrete rules for the protected time. This can include turning off notifications, setting do not disturb modes, or physically relocating to a space free of distractions. If external interruptions are unavoidable, communicate clearly and assertively with colleagues, friends, or family that these periods are non-negotiable. Framing this time as a commitment to self-improvement rather than selfish withdrawal encourages respect while reinforcing personal accountability. Ritualization strengthens adherence. Associate the beginning and end of growth periods with specific cues: a cup of tea, a stretch, lighting a candle, or a brief meditation. These signals condition the mind to enter a state of focus, creating a mental container for learning and practice. Over time, the ritual itself becomes a form of boundary, reducing resistance and signaling that this block of time is distinct, purposeful, and protected. Guard against internal distractions with structured planning. Before each session, define clear objectives, outcomes, and steps. Ambiguity invites wandering attention and excuses for procrastination. A predefined agenda channels energy directly into deliberate action, minimizing opportunities for the mind to drift toward trivial or reactive tasks. Intentionality transforms protected time from idle space into a productive, growth-oriented incubator. Physical environment matters. Arrange a space that supports concentration and minimizes sensory disruption. A tidy desk, appropriate lighting, and limited visual clutter reinforce the sanctity of growth time. Tools and resources should be prepped in advance so that the focus remains uninterrupted. Environment is a silent partner in habit enforcement. Carefully curated surroundings reduce reliance on willpower and increase the likelihood of adherence. Consider temporal scaling. Not every day allows for extended, uninterrupted periods, but even short intervals can be protected if treated with consistency and purpose. A 30-minute session of focused learning or reflection, repeated daily, can be more transformative than sporadic multi-hour blocks. Boundaries are more effective when embedded into routine, creating predictable windows where growth is expected, habitual, and non-negotiable. Integrate digital hygiene. Devices are both tools and adversaries. Designate specific times for email, messaging, or social media to prevent them from encroaching on protected periods. Consider minimalist strategies, such as disabling notifications, using website blockers, or maintaining a separate device solely for work or personal growth. By controlling digital access, attention becomes a resource allocated intentionally rather than scattered reactively. Evaluate social commitments critically. Not all invitations, obligations, or interactions warrant equal attention. Develop a simple criterion to assess whether engagement contributes to growth, relationships, or meaningful purpose. Decline or reschedule commitments that conflict with protected periods. This practice cultivates both clarity and courage, reinforcing that time invested in the development of self is as important as time spent on external obligations. Anchor boundaries and accountability. Share intentions with a trusted peer, mentor, or partner who can reinforce adherence through gentle oversight or collaborative structure. External acknowledgement transforms boundaries from internal preferences into enforceable commitments. Accountability ensures that the concept of protected time is treated as serious and non-negotiable, reinforcing the habit through social and psychological reinforcement. Use reflective checkpoints. At the end of each week, review adherence to boundaries. Note successes, challenges, and patterns of intrusion. Adjust strategies based on observation. Continuous feedback creates an adaptive system where boundaries evolve to match real-world pressures, while maintaining their protective function. Reflection also builds awareness of subtle compromises that could undermine long-term consistency. Leverage the principle of negotiation, not confrontation. Boundaries do not require rigidity in all cases, but must be clear and enforceable. Communicate the rationale, growth, focus, and skill building to others in a way that invites understanding rather than resistance. This approach preserves relationships while safeguarding personal investment. Boundaries framed positively as enablers of progress gain both internal and external support. Balance structure with flexibility. Life is unpredictable, and rigid boundaries without allowance for adaptation can create frustration or collapse. Develop contingency strategies to preserve growth when interruptions are unavoidable. Shifting timing, consolidating tasks, or creating compensatory periods ensures that boundaries remain protective rather than punitive. Intentional flexibility maintains discipline while acknowledging reality. Visual reminders reinforce commitment. Physical cues, calendar blocks, or environmental signals constantly signal the importance of protected time. These reminders reduce reliance on memory or willpower and maintain the psychological prominence of the boundary. When attention is repeatedly drawn toward distractions, visual reinforcement strengthens mental adherence. Embed rewards for adherence. Consistently protecting growth time is an act of discipline that deserves acknowledgement. Positive reinforcement, reflecting on accomplishments, enjoying a brief reward, or recognizing progress, strengthens habit formation and motivates sustained effort. Celebrating small wins ensures boundaries are maintained not through coercion but through consistent reinforcement of positive outcomes. Differentiate between urgent and important tasks rigorously. Boundaries are most effective when growth activities are prioritized over reactive demands. Apply a decision framework to determine which tasks genuinely advance skill, knowledge, or insight, and which are merely immediate or low value. This distinction empowers selective attention, ensuring that the time dedicated to growth is not hijacked by noise disguised as necessity. Design compound protection strategies. Combine multiple techniques, environmental control, social agreements, scheduled planning, and digital limitation into a cohesive system. Each layer strengthens the boundary and reduces risk of intrusion. This redundancy ensures that even when one strategy falters, others maintain the integrity of protected periods, creating a robust framework for uninterrupted growth. Recognize that boundaries are acts of self-respect. Protecting time for learning, reflection, and skill building communicates internally that growth matters, that effort invested in self-improvement is a priority, and that attention is a resource worthy of stewardship. This recognition strengthens commitment and reinforces a mindset in which intentional development is normalized rather than exceptional. Finally, view boundary design as iterative. Each day and week provides insight into what works and what does not. Adapt strategies based on experience, adjusting timing, environment, or social arrangements to enhance adherence. Growth is not only the product of the time protected, but also of the wisdom applied to maintain its protection consistently. By deliberately designing boundaries, life shifts from constant reactive motion to intentional cultivation. Protected growth time becomes a sacred container where skill, insight, and resilience are nurtured without interference. Over time, these boundaries compound, creating a mind trained in focus, a skill set developed with depth, and a sense of agency that resists external pressures. Boundaries are not barriers to life, they are enablers of transformation, ensuring that each hour invested in growth produces lasting impact, clarity, and mastery. Number 8. Eliminate tasks, offering no expansion. Life is filled with tasks, many of which feel necessary, urgent, or unavoidable, yet contribute little to growth, skill, or long-term fulfillment. Hours spent responding to trivial demands, performing repetitive actions without reflection, or engaging in activities that neither challenge nor expand the mind accumulate into years of lost potential. Eliminating tasks, offering no expansion, is the deliberate act of distinguishing motion from progress, action from value. It is about ruthlessly pruning routines, obligations, and habits that consume attention without developing capability, insight, or personal power, allowing space for work that genuinely transforms life. The first step is to inventory all tasks, responsibilities, and commitments. Record every action undertaken over a week, From professional obligations to personal routines include minor activities often ignored, such as repeated checking of messages, unnecessary social media engagement, or low-value meetings. Each task should be cataloged along with the time spent, perceived importance, and actual contribution to growth or future capability. Awareness is essential. Only by seeing the full picture can meaningful elimination occur. Next, evaluate each task against a strict criterion of expansion. Ask whether the activity develops skill, deepens knowledge, strengthens character, builds relationships, or creates meaningful outcomes. If the answer is no, mark the task for reduction, delegation, or elimination. This process requires honesty, comfort, and habit, often masquerade as necessity. Growth demands the courage to confront routine inertia and recognize which obligations are drains on energy and attention. Distinguish between urgent and important tasks. Urgency often masquerades as importance, leading to reactive action that fills the day without producing long-term benefit. Evaluate whether a task contributes to goals, learning, or development, rather than simply demanding immediate attention. By separating urgency from significance, focus is directed toward what creates lasting impact, rather than what simply consumes time. Delegate when possible. Many non-expansive tasks can be reassigned without negative consequences. Whether at work or in personal life, identify tasks that do not require your unique capability and transfer responsibility. Delegation frees cognitive and temporal resources for high-value activities. It also cultivates trust, collaboration, and efficiency, reinforcing a mindset oriented toward impact rather than busyness. Consider automation as a tool for elimination. Routine tasks that offer no expansion but are necessary for operational continuity, such as scheduling, reminders, or basic administrative processes, can often be automated using technology. This reduces mental load and prevents repetitive actions from fragmenting attention. Automation ensures essential functions are maintained while minimizing opportunity cost in skill building or growth-focused endeavors. Set clear boundaries around obligations that are non-essential. Meetings, social obligations, or requests for assistance often drift into time blocks meant for meaningful work. Politely declining or rescheduling non-critical commitments preserves space for tasks that challenge and expand capability. Boundaries are not acts of avoidance, but deliberate structuring of energy toward high-impact activity. Apply a reflective lens to habitual behaviors. Many routines are performed without conscious evaluation, such as habitual scrolling, repetitive low-value email checks, or default engagement in minor chores. Examine each habit for its contribution to long-term growth or immediate necessity. Replace empty routines with deliberate actions that develop insight, skill, or character. This continuous adjustment transforms the daily flow of activity from passive repetition into intentional progression. Prioritize tasks with compounding benefits. Some actions produce returns beyond immediate completion, such as learning a new skill, networking meaningfully, creating intellectual work, or improving systems that amplify productivity. High-leverage activities should dominate attention, while non-expansive actions are minimized. Over time, prioritizing compounding efforts exponentially increases capability, influence, and results. Develop a decision framework for incoming requests. Every new task should be assessed for its contribution to expansion. Questions such as, does this move me closer to skill mastery or knowledge growth? Or, will this strengthen my long-term capabilities? Allow immediate filtering. The habit of rapid evaluation prevents unnecessary energy expenditure and ensures that focus remains aligned with growth objectives. Integrate time blocking to protect growth activities. Allocate dedicated periods for high-value work and explicitly mark non-expansive tasks as optional or delegated. Visual separation reinforces mental prioritization, reducing the likelihood that low-impact activity encroaches upon periods meant for deliberate development. Structured time enforces accountability to oneself, ensuring energy is directed toward meaningful output. Reassess tasks periodically. Activities that were once valuable may lose relevance over time. Weekly or monthly review identifies routines, projects, or commitments that no longer produce meaningful growth. By continuously refining the list of actionable priorities, the process of elimination remains dynamic, adaptive, and aligned with evolving goals. Cultivate the courage to say no. Social and professional pressures often compel engagement in low-value tasks. Saying no is not rejection of others, but affirmation of self-prioritization and growth-oriented focus. Each refusal reinforces discipline, preserves energy, and signals commitment to long-term capability rather than short-term appeasement. Minimize distractions disguised as minor tasks. Interruptions such as casual browsing, frequent check-ins, or reactive responses fragment attention and reduce the quality of engagement in meaningful work. Identify these interruptions and establish strict limits or eliminate them entirely. Reducing cognitive clutter enhances the ability to immerse fully in tasks that develop skill, insight, or understanding. Align tasks with personal mission and long-term vision. Every action should serve a broader purpose, either by creating tangible outcomes, developing ability, or reinforcing strategic goals. Tasks that do not serve this alignment are candidates for elimination. By connecting daily actions to vision, the process of filtering low-value activities becomes not only practical, but deeply motivating. Combine elimination with substitution where needed. When a non-expansive task leaves a void, fill it with growth-oriented alternatives. Replace trivial activities with reading, reflection, skill practice, or creative work. Substitution prevents the mind from defaulting back into habitual busyness and ensures that freed time contributes directly to capability development. Leverage accountability structures. Share goals of eliminating low-value tasks with mentors, peers, or colleagues who can reinforce commitment. External visibility creates psychological reinforcement and encourages adherence. When others understand the focus on meaningful activity, the pressure to comply with non-essential demands is reduced, supporting the process of elimination. Recognize the psychological impact of removal. Each eliminated task strengthens confidence, reinforces prioritization skills, and improves focus. The mental clarity that results from conscious pruning produces not only efficiency, but also a sense of agency over time and energy. Awareness of what is deliberately avoided cultivates discipline, ensuring that attention is invested in areas that produce true personal evolution. Integrate rewards for strategic action. Completing high-value tasks, observing elimination practices, and sustaining focus deserve acknowledgement. Recognition reinforces adherence to the principle of prioritization and incentivizes the continued removal of non-expansive activity. Positive reinforcement strengthens habit formation, embedding a growth-centric approach into daily routines. Finally, embrace the iterative nature of the process. Eliminating non-expansive tasks is not a one-time action, but a continuous practice. Life evolves, goals shift, and new distractions arise. Regular evaluation, adjustment, and refinement ensure that energy remains concentrated on what develops skill, insight, resilience, and capability. By systematically eliminating tasks that offer no expansion, life shifts from reactive consumption of time to deliberate investment in growth. Each removed obligation creates space for skill building, knowledge acquisition, meaningful work, and personal evolution. Over weeks and months, the compounded effect transforms attention, energy, and habit structures, producing a life oriented toward capability, mastery, and sustained progress. This disciplined pruning ensures that every action serves a purpose, every hour is leveraged, and each day contributes meaningfully to the person you are becoming. Number 9. Choose environments that elevate you. The environments we inhabit silently shape our thoughts, behaviors, and potential. From the people we spend time with to the spaces we occupy, every setting exerts influence, either elevating us toward growth or subtly anchoring us in stagnation. Choosing environments that elevate you is a conscious act of aligning surroundings with aspiration, ensuring that external conditions support focus, learning, and personal evolution. It is not merely about aesthetics or comfort. It is about designing the ecosystem in which your skills, habits, and character can flourish. Begin by assessing current environments with honesty. Examine workspaces, social circles, living spaces, and digital domains. Identify aspects that inspire clarity, creativity, and energy, as well as those that drain attention, induce stress, or reinforce mediocrity. Subtle cues, like clutter, background noise, or even ambient attitudes of peers, impact cognitive and emotional performance more than is often recognized. Awareness of environmental influences creates the foundation for deliberate improvement. Physical space is the most immediate factor to optimize. A workspace organized to minimize distractions, maximize accessibility, and stimulate focus naturally encourages productive habits. Lighting, seating, temperature, and even color influence mental energy and concentration. Spaces that are chaotic or uncomfortable subtly invite procrastination and mental fatigue. Designing surroundings that foster concentration, creativity, and comfort produces an invisible but powerful force multiplier for growth-oriented action. Social environment plays an equally significant role. The people with whom you interact daily influence norms, expectations, and ambition. Relationships that celebrate curiosity, integrity, and learning elevate behavior, whereas associations centered on complaint, distraction, or conformity can suppress potential. Seek peers, mentors, and communities that challenge thinking, inspire effort, and model behaviors aligned with personal growth. Surrounding yourself with elevated minds creates a natural gravity toward improvement. Consider the informational environment as well. The content consumed, books, articles, podcasts, social media, and news shapes perception and knowledge. Environments saturated with trivial or negative information reduce cognitive energy and reinforce limiting beliefs. Curate inputs carefully, prioritizing materials that expand understanding, challenge assumptions, or cultivate skill. The mind is a garden. Environments dictate whether weeds proliferate or valuable growth is nurtured. Time-based environmental design is critical. Align daily schedules with contexts that maximize potential. Allocate periods for deep work in distraction-free spaces, and choose social interactions that stimulate creativity and reflection, rather than superficial engagement. Structured timing ensures that elevated environments are not merely occasional, but integrated into the rhythm of life, reinforcing consistency and growth-oriented behavior. Digital environments demand equal scrutiny. Devices, platforms, and applications exert subtle influence on attention, emotion, and cognition. Identify software and routines that fragment focus or promote passive consumption, and replace them with tools that support creation, learning, and meaningful communication. Digital hygiene is as essential as physical organization. Controlling digital space protects mental clarity and energy for growth. In addition to selection, consider modification of environments. Sometimes ideal spaces or circles do not exist naturally and must be created. Rearrange physical spaces to promote focus and efficiency. Intentionally seek communities or professional networks that reflect values and aspirations. Invite collaboration with individuals whose ambition, discipline, or insight elevates collective potential. When environments are intentionally constructed, external conditions reinforce rather than undermine growth. Embed cues that trigger productive habits. Design environments with intentional prompts for focus, creativity, and learning. Visible notes, organized workstations, or strategically placed resources act as reminders, nudging behavior toward desired actions. These environmental cues reduce reliance on willpower, ensuring that high-value actions occur with regularity and efficiency. Avoid toxic influences that inhibit potential. Recognize sources of negativity, distraction, or manipulation in social, professional, or informational spheres. These elements not only consume time, but distort perception and erode confidence. Minimizing exposure, whether by physical distancing, filtering communication, or curating intake, preserves attention, energy, and motivation for activities that genuinely promote growth. Prioritize spaces that facilitate reflection and solitude. Environments conducive to introspection allow for deep learning, planning, and problem-solving. Silence, minimal interruption, and a degree of separation from reactive demands enable the mind to consolidate insight, explore ideas, and develop clarity. Such spaces are crucial for connecting effort with purpose, transforming action into deliberate progress. Seek challenge-rich environments, surrounding oneself with people, projects, or contexts that push capability encourages continuous adaptation and skill development. Comfortable or unchallenging settings may feel safe, but inhibit growth. Exposure to constructive difficulty, complex problems, rigorous feedback, or high expectations accelerates competence and resilience, fostering an elevated trajectory of development. Monitor energy flow within environments. Observe which settings produce sustained focus, creativity, and engagement versus fatigue, distraction, or frustration. Energy is a finite resource, and environments either replenish or deplete it. Designing circumstances that optimize vitality ensures that growth-oriented activity can be performed at high intensity and maintained over time. Leverage environmental accountability. Integrate cues or structures that reinforce commitments, such as collaborative workspaces, peer check-ins, or visible progress tracking. When surroundings reflect purpose, discipline is easier to maintain. Environmental accountability transforms intention from abstract desire into enforceable action, supporting sustained adherence to growth-focused routines. Consider mobility and flexibility. Elevated environments are not fixed. Travel, relocation, or temporary immersion in growth-oriented spaces can accelerate development. Retreats, workshops, or collaborative settings often provide intense periods of learning and skill acquisition. Strategically incorporating diverse contexts prevents stagnation and fosters adaptability, broadening perspective while reinforcing elevated standards. Integrate sensory optimization. Sound, light, temperature, and tactile input influence cognitive function and emotional state. Adjusting these factors to reduce stress and enhance focus creates a subtle but powerful foundation for productivity and insight. Environments that engage the senses in support of purpose amplify the capacity for sustained attention and creative output. Evaluate environmental feedback continuously. Regularly assess whether current settings continue to elevate potential. Life circumstances evolve, and environments that once fostered growth may become stagnant. Adaptive evaluation allows for modification, seeking new spaces, relationships, or informational inputs that maintain elevation and prevent complacency. Commit to proactive environmental design as a habit. The process of selecting, modifying, and curating surroundings is ongoing. Small adjustments, organizing a desk, updating digital feeds, joining a productive community accumulate into significant influence over behavior, mindset, and skill acquisition. Proactivity ensures that external conditions consistently reinforce goals rather than undermining them. Finally, recognize that environment and identity are intertwined. Surroundings do more than support action. They shape beliefs, ambitions, and sense of possibility. By choosing and designing elevated environments, the mind, habits, and capabilities align with aspiration. Growth becomes the default response to surroundings rather than a forced struggle against inertia or distraction. The deliberate cultivation of elevated contexts magnifies focus, accelerates skill acquisition, and fosters a mindset oriented toward continual expansion. Through conscious selection, modification, and curation of environments, life is structured to amplify potential. Every space, relationship, and informational intake can be leveraged to elevate energy, focus, and capable environments that challenge, inspire, and support act as catalysts, transforming ordinary effort into extraordinary growth. By choosing surroundings with intentionality, every moment is infused with the conditions necessary for sustained development, enabling a trajectory of continual improvement, resilience, and personal excellence. Number 10. Track transformation, not job promotions. Too often, life is measured by external markers of success: titles, salary increases, promotions, or accolades. These benchmarks, while tangible, are fleeting and frequently disconnected from genuine growth. Tracking transformation rather than job promotions is the conscious decision to measure progress in terms of personal evolution, skills acquired, habits refined, resilience developed, and insight gained. Transformation reflects mastery over self, capability in action, and alignment with long-term goals, creating an internal metric that cannot be undermined by organizational dynamics, recognition delays, or arbitrary hierarchies. The first step is to define what meaningful transformation looks like. Consider the qualities, skills, and states of being that, when developed, constitute progress independent of professional validation. These might include emotional resilience, critical thinking, communication mastery, creative problem solving, or discipline in daily habits. Defining transformation in precise, measurable, and observable terms allows growth to be tracked objectively, rather than relying on the timing or availability of external recognition. Documenting progress is crucial. Keep a log, journal, or digital record detailing accomplishments, lessons learned, and habits strengthened. Include reflections on challenges faced, decisions made, and personal responses to adversity. This archive becomes a living narrative of transformation, revealing patterns, strength, and areas for further refinement. Unlike job titles or performance reviews, this record reflects authentic capability and growth under your control. Set specific benchmarks for transformation. Break broad goals into actionable steps that can be measured over time. For example, mastering a communication skill could involve tracking presentations delivered, feedback received, and adjustments implemented. Developing resilience might be measured by the frequency of deliberate exposure to discomfort or reflective problem solving. Concrete metrics create accountability, turning abstract improvement into actionable milestones. Shift focus from outcomes determined by others to inputs within your control. Promotions, raises, and recognition are subject to timing, politics, and organizational constraints. Transformation, however, is determined by effort, practice, and conscious decision-making. By tracking metrics under personal control, confidence is derived from agency rather than luck, position, or approval, creating stability and momentum in pursuit of self-mastery. Evaluate skills regularly. Assess competence in areas aligned with long-term goals. Self-testing, simulations, or practical application provides objective insight into capability growth. Skill assessment creates awareness of gaps and opportunities for deliberate practice, ensuring transformation is visible and measurable rather than inferred from external indicators. Incorporate reflective practices. Regularly pause to consider whether daily actions, decisions, and habits are contributing to long-term transformation. Reflection ensures that energy is consistently directed toward meaningful development and prevents the mind from equating busyness or superficial accomplishments with genuine progress. Deep introspection transforms routine behavior into intentional growth, linking effort to observable change. Recognize incremental improvement. Transformation is rarely instantaneous. It is a cumulative effect of repeated, disciplined action. Small gains compound over time, producing significant long-term capability. Acknowledge incremental progress, no matter how subtle, and reinforce habits that create forward momentum. By celebrating internal growth rather than external rewards, motivation becomes intrinsic, resilient to circumstance or recognition delays. Anchor tracking in diverse domains. Transformation encompasses more than technical skill or professional competence. Include areas such as emotional intelligence, problem-solving capacity, creativity, ethical decision-making, and physical health. Broad metrics ensure that growth is holistic, producing a self capable of thriving in varied environments rather than narrowly defined by job-specific outcomes. Seek feedback intentionally. While external validation is not the goal, structured feedback from mentors, peers, or self-assessment tools provides insight into areas of strength and weakness. Use feedback as a lens to measure progress objectively, aligning perception with reality. Constructive critique accelerates transformation, allowing for course correction and refinement of skills and habits. Prioritize learning over performance. Tracking transformation emphasizes acquisition of capability and understanding, rather than immediate results. A failed project, challenging interaction, or complex problem is valuable if it produces insight, adaptation, and skill development. By focusing on what is learned, not merely what is achieved, progress becomes continuous, measurable, and internally rewarding. Develop visual indicators of transformation. Charts, progress trackers, or milestone markers create tangible evidence of personal evolution. Visual feedback reinforces awareness of growth, motivating sustained effort, and providing clarity when external recognition is slow or absent. The visualization of incremental advancement transforms abstract development into concrete proof of progress. Evaluate emotional growth. Monitor responses to stress, setbacks, and uncertainty. Track moments of self-control, patience, and composure as indicators of resilience. Emotional transformation is as critical as technical skill, influencing decision-making, relationships, and sustained performance. By observing internal states, personal evolution is measured in meaningful and enduring ways. Embed narrative reflection. Regularly articulate the story of personal growth. Record how skills, mindset, and habits have evolved over time. Storytelling transforms scattered observations into a coherent narrative, reinforcing identity as someone committed to deliberate development. Transformation becomes evident in the arc of learning, adaptation, and maturity rather than external accolades. Allocate time for deliberate experimentation. Transformation occurs at the edge of comfort. Engage in projects, challenges, or learning opportunities that test ability and provoke adaptation. Track outcomes not by external approval but by growth, insight, and capacity gained. Challenges provide measurable evidence of transformation when success is defined internally rather than externally. Integrate comparative self-assessment. Periodically compare current skills, behaviors, and responses to prior states. Identify areas of improvement, progress, and refinement. This longitudinal approach reveals transformation over time, reinforcing the value of sustained effort and providing motivation grounded in observable change rather than positional advancement. Separate identity from professional ranking. Avoid equating self-worth with job titles, promotions, or salary. Identity anchored in external markers is fragile and reactive. Tracking transformation emphasizes competence, wisdom, and self-mastery, creating a stable foundation that thrives regardless of career trajectory. Transformation becomes the metric of significance, not hierarchical placement. Develop systems for accountability. Structured tracking routines, scheduled reflection sessions, or mentorship review points reinforce commitment to measuring personal growth. Systems ensure that progress is documented, observed, and reinforced, preventing drift towards superficial achievements or externally defined success. Accountability creates continuity and transformation, even when external recognition is absent. Cultivate patience and perspectives. Transformation is long-term, often invisible in day-to-day observation. Trust in the process and acknowledge that consistent effort compounds over time. By framing progress through internal metrics, setbacks are reframed as learning opportunities rather than failures, reinforcing resilience and persistence. Finally, integrate transformation as a core orientation to life. By valuing growth over promotion, skill over title, and mastery over recognition, all actions are evaluated through the lens of personal development. This mindset produces independence, agency, and sustainable progress. Transformation becomes a continuous journey, self-directed, measurable, and internally motivating, creating a life where capability, insight, and resilience define success far beyond the confines of job hierarchy. By tracking transformation instead of job promotions, life is measured by growth, skill, and the evolution of character. Each choice, reflection, and disciplined action becomes an investment in self, producing capabilities and understanding that endure regardless of external acknowledgement. Over time, this internal focus builds a resilient, competent, and adaptive self, capable of thriving under any circumstances and generating fulfillment that external markers alone cannot provide. The trajectory of life is shaped not by titles attained but by the depth, breadth, and authenticity of transformation achieved.